Shalom, Bracha. Welcome once again to Mitzvah Study, a division of Tanakh Study and part of Parasha Plus. My name is Rabbi Ikey Tawil, and we have crossed over into Sefer Shemot, where there are a lot more mitzvot. Again, it's going to take another week or two to get them actually connected to each and every parasha. So what we're going to be doing is taking some of the mitzvot that we find later on in the Sefer, and we are going to be spreading them out and trying to prioritize with the most practical mitzvot. This week's mitzvah in Parashat Shemot is mitzvat Kiddush HaHodesh. Kiddush HaHodesh being the first mitzvah that is given to us as a nation. HaHodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. Let's check it out from Shemot, Perek Yod Bet, Pasuk Bet. Again, another Pasuk, Perek Yud Gimal, Pasuk Yod. And also again in Devarim, Tet Zayin Yod Aleph. As I mentioned, HaHodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. Rishon hu lachem lechodshei Hashana. This month is going to be the beginning of the months for you, and it's going to set the tone for HaHodesh Hashana. This is very important, as we'll see later on. Second pasuk, V'shamarta ha'chukah hazot l'moadah miyamim yamima. So you're going to keep this as a chok, as a statute, and it's going to happen the moadah, which means va'ad, the time of meeting, each and every time, miyamim yamima, for all of your days, for each year, years to come, it is going to be renewed. And finally in Devarim, Shamor et Chodesh HaAviv, Ve'asita Pesach l'Adonai Elohecha, Ki bechodesh HaAviv hotziacha Adonai Elohecha, Mim Misraim Laila. So we said that now, also this is to observe the month of the Aviv, to give the Pesach sacrifice. We see that the seasons are connected to the holidays, which is going to be, again, of utmost importance. And we see that connected directly to Pesach, which is going to be of the most important holidays because it carries with it karet if a person gets the date wrong. So we see that these are the Pesukim that highlight this great mitzvah to mark the beginning of the months, to keep account of the months in order to keep account of also the years, and also to have those years and months fit into the cycle of the seasons to also be able to establish the holidays. So just a very important point from Masechet Rosh Hashanah, in the first Perek, Daf Yod Bet Amud Bet, we see that there's a lengthy discussion amongst the poskim that say, how do we know that Rosh Chodashim is Nisan? We could say, Rabbi, we know that Pesach is in Nisan, and it calls it, but if you look at the Pesukim carefully, it never says Chodesh Nisan. First of all, these names are taken and adopted later on, not from Jewish origins. We just see in the Torah that it's called by the number, the Chodesh HaRevi'i, Chodesh HaAsiri. Again, it's just naming the numbers of the Chodashim. So how do we know which one is the first one? We're saying HaHodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. We can connect it to Pesach, but maybe it's the springtime month. Maybe sometimes there's a very cold Nisan. Maybe it can be Iyar. Maybe it can be a very warm Adar. So how do we know? So after multiple attempts by the different Amoraim, we find out in Masechet Rosh Hashanah that it's a Mesorah b'yadenu. It's a tradition that was passed down from Moshe Rabbeinu to all of us, that was the month where we left Mitzrayim, that it was indeed Nisan, which is something that we need to understand, that yes, the rabbis tried to deal with it. We don't see it explicitly in the Torah, but it's a Mesorah b'yadenu, and the Torah Shebaal Peh clearly highlights it, that the first month, when it says HaHodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim, it is talking about how we're counting the months of the year. So the first one, Chodesh Rishon, Chodesh HaRishon, is Chodesh Nisan. We take a look in Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah Daled, the fourth mitzvah. It's Mitzvat Kiddush HaHodesh. And we see that, again, Sefer HaChinuch highlights that the mitzvah is, and I'll read, the Kadesh Chodashim Ula'aber Shanim Bebedin Gadol Bechochma Samuch Ba'aretz. Right? That means what has to happen is that there's a very specific process about establishing Kiddush HaChodesh. It is done only in Yerushalayim. It is done only Ayedeh Bet Din. It is done with witnesses. The witnesses have to have a clear smicha, a reliance that was passed down from generation to generation, that these rabbis were not only trustworthy, but they were equipped to be able to be Mekadesh the Chodesh. And the purpose was Likboa Mo'adeh HaShana Al Pi Oto Kiddush. in order to, and based on this Kiddush HaHodesh, this sanctifying of the month, and saying, yes, this is in fact the Rosh Chodesh of this month, the whole purpose is to make sure that our holidays land on time. So as Sefer HaChinuch points out, Kilomar, as if to say, in interpreting HaHodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim, Keshetir'u Hidusha Shel Levana, Tikbe'u Lachem Rosh Chodesh, when you see that the Levana, the moon, is in its new state, you establish that it's Rosh Chodesh, and therefore anything that comes in that month, any holiday, is going to be at the correct time. Sefer HaChinuch then gives us a nice question, and it's just important to know. The reason why I highlighted this question is, as I said, the person needs to be one of the simuchin, meaning have gotten semicha, literally anointing, from in an unbroken chain from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Sefer HaChinuch says, "Ve'im tish'al," if you're going to ask, "Im ken, he'ach anu osim hayom, she'en lanu chachamim simuchin." How are we able to do this mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh nowadays when we do not have rabbis who are officially musmach, meaning they did not get semicha? What we mean by semicha means either by the Shemen HaMishcha or directly in a direct unbroken chain from Moshe. We don't have that; it was retired. So what do? So we say, Da, Shekach Kibalnu Sherabi Hillel Hanasi, which was the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Shaya Gadol B'Doro, Rahilel, V'Nismach Ba'aretz, and he was also nismach, he received semicha. Hu hacham shetiken lanu cheshbon ha'ibur. The calendar of Hillel, and again I'm simplifying it. There were many stages of the calendar that led to us accepting Hillel's calendar. We have Hillel was the one that was shetiken lanu cheshbon ha'ibur, and hu kidesh hodashim ve'avar shanim ha'atidim lavo ad sheyavo Eliyahu. He gave us the system that you can make a 500-year calendar sitting at your desk. If you knew all of the rules, it'd take you some time, but you can tell with all the rules that he gave us, you can know the calendar le'olam va'ed. So since he was the author and the establisher of this calendar, and he himself was musmach, so therefore we rely on him. It says ve'al zeh anu somchin hayom. This is what we rely on today. The Rambam has an entire section of Mishneh Torah just dedicated to Hilchot Kiddush HaHodesh. It's about 19 chapters, and it's really phenomenal. So again, we're not doing the entire Kiddush HaHodesh process justice in this short video, but again, I just wanted to give you some highlights. So the Rambam in Perek He Halacha Gimal states, "Ume'emata itchilu kol Yisrael lahashev v'hashbon zeh." When did Bnei Israel all start to use this calculation of the calendar of Hillel? Misof Chachmei HaGemara, at the end of the times of the Gemara, Be'ayit shechorba Eretz Yisrael, when Eretz Yisrael was destroyed, V'lo nishar sham bet din kavua, and there was no high court, no bet din. Aval b'mei Chachmei Mishnah, v'chein b'mei Chachmei HaGemara, ad yemei Abaye v'Rava, al kviat Eretz Yisrael hayu somchim. They actually had to go. After the times of the Talmud, that was when we decided to go with the set calendar, but otherwise before then we would actually go and have these witnesses tell us what did they see, is the next month starting or not, and they actually had to give that testimony in Eretz Yisrael in Yerushalayim, and then we would get word to the rest of Eretz Yisrael and the Gola. Back to Sefer HaChinuch in Mitzvah Daled, which just tells us what's the shoresh of this mitzvah. The shoresh of this mitzvah is, again, as we said, so that we can make the appropriate timing of the holidays at the right time that the Torah prescribed. And there's interesting just math here. Again, we're simplifying the math, but the Sefer HaChinuch comes and tells us that the reason why this was necessary is because not only do we have to tell what day of the month it is, but when to add a month. As we said, Mu'adah miyamim yamima, which tells us that the years have to be counted, and also Mu'adah, that the Mu'adim have to come at the same time each year, using as Pesach, HaHodesh Ha'aviv in the spring. So if you do the math, we are following the lunar cycle is 354 days, 8 hours, and 876 parts. The parts add up to minutes and hours. But again, it can add up to hours, but again, add up to extra minutes. And this is less than the solar year by 10 days, 21 hours, and 204 parts. So if each year you're losing, there's a lag of the lunar calendar and the solar calendar by 10 days, so every 3 years you're going to lose a month. So around every 3 years, we throw in an extra month into our calendar to compensate for the lag. This is so that Pesach, after 12 years, won't end up being in the middle of the winter. The Muslims, by contrast, they only follow the lunar calendar, and therefore that's why their holiday, such as Ramadan, is slides with the slides from year to year, and sometimes you'll have Ramadan in the summer and sometimes in the winter. But we compensate again that pasuk of Chodesh Aviv Asita Pesach. Also is meant in the Torah to keep us honest that the holidays happen at that time. So the reason why this was so important was to establish you have to have an accurate lunar cycle. You have to be keeping tabs on the lag, know when to add the month to make sure that the holidays come at during the right season. The Rambam, I thought this was interesting just for everybody to know that now based on the calculations, we said, what did the Edim used to do? The witnesses used to go and they used to see, did the new moon start? If the new moon started, they would always go up on the night of the 29th, and they would say, okay, maybe night of the 28th, really, of the month, and they would try to see if the tiniest sliver of the new moon was ready to begin, and then that would mean that in the daytime, that would be Rosh Chodesh. If they didn't see anything, they would say, okay, we need to add a day to this month. There are only two options in Judaism for the Jewish month. A Jewish month could either be 29 days, which is considered a haser, a month that's lacking, meaning the 30th day, or it could be a full month, and it has that 30th day. On a month that has the 30th day, it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh. Day 30 is Rosh Chodesh, even though it's still of the previous month, and Aleph, the second day of Rosh Chodesh, is day 1 of the incoming month. That's just an important fact to always keep in your brain. And when we do that, when we see that we add a month, we add a day, that's going to affect the holiday in that month. The Rambam says that and gives it to us in Perek Het Halacha He in Laws of Kiddush HaHodesh, gives us the actual that nowadays it's pretty much said. So he says, Seder HaChodashim HaMelim VeHaserim Lefi Heshbon Zeh Kachu. According to all of these calculations, the order of these months, of which month in the calendar is Haser, meaning missing the 30th day and it only has 29 days, or Maleh, full and has 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, is going to be, he's going to give that to us as follows. He says, Tishrei le'olam maleh. Right, or has Sfaradim interpreted right. Tishri is always maleh. Tishri always has 30 days. Vetevet le'olam haser, and Tevet is always haser, which is the month that we're currently in. Umi Tevet ve'elach, and then from Tevet and going on, Ehad maleh ve'ehad haser. One will be, it'll alternate. One will be full and one will be haser, will be missing. Al haseder, in order. Ketzad, how does this work? Tevet is haser, Shevat is maleh, Adar is haser, Nisan is maleh, Iyar is haser, Sivan is maleh, Tammuz haser, Av maleh, and Elul is haser. So we have this in a cycle. And again, Ubeshana me'uberet, Adar Rishon maleh ve'Adar Sheni haser. So now what happens when you want to add a month? So the first Adar is full with 30 days, and the second Adar, where we have Purim, is going to be haser. So you can always refer back to this slide, or if you're listening at home, Rambam Kiddush HaHodesh, Perek Het, Halacha He. So now I thought to just, with the time that we have left, that I thought would be very appropriate would be to just go over some of the laws of Birkat HaLevana, because what constitutes the renewal of the Chodesh is the renewal of the cycle of the moon, and we actually have this ritual of Birkat HaLevana each month, and it's very important that we just know some of the halachot about Kiddush Levana, and I put it in here. So you see it on the slides. So we said when we see the new moon, we make the blessing on the new moon. Now, really what we're saying is, what is the syntax, the nusach of Birkat HaLevana? It's Mehadesh Chobrot Hashem, right? Mehadesh Chodashim. That the months become renewed. So we're not making any blessing on the moon itself. The moon is the representation of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in His infinite wisdom, gave us a marker that we're able to now set up our calendar and worship Him in the correct way and keep the Torah Mechadesh Chodashim. So yes, you can fluff it up a little bit and say, wow, it's a beracha on nature and the constellations, all good. But the real key part here is Mechadesh Chodashim, that He gives us the way, the vehicle to which to keep the mitzvot, and He gave us the concept of Kiddush HaHodesh. So every single month we're going to acknowledge that. When do we say this beracha? We say this beracha when the moon is mevusam. So the rabbis have a mahloket. What does that mean, mevusam? So you see that mevusam, the rabbis interpret it as it's shining sweetly, meaning very brightly. And Maran Shulchan Aruch says that this occurs after the first 7 days of the lunar cycle. So 7 days into the month, that's when we, according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, that's the first time that you're allowed to say the beracha. We don't say it before 7 days into the Hebrew month. And the latest day would be the 15th, because then already it's going to start to wane. The moon waxes and wanes. Waxes getting bigger and wanes and waning getting smaller. So you have about that 8-day window to be able to be mekadesh the levana. Bright. How do I tell if it's shining brightly? There has to be enough light from the moon to be able to tell the difference between two coins. If a person can do that, then it is shining brightly enough. Therefore, because of that, we don't say the beracha when the clouds are covering the moon. There's a mahloket, which we're going to get to sooner, I should say it now, between Ben Ish Chai and HaHodesh Yosef. The Ben Ish Chai says even a thin cloud, it's no good for Birkat HaLevana. If there's a thin cloud, the smallest, even faintest cloud covering the Levana, you can't say the beracha. HaHodesh Yosef says if the moon is still shining through and it's very, very, very thin cloud, then you can say the beracha, especially if you're in danger of losing the beracha for the month. We follow HaHodesh Yosef, but yes, there are definitely some people who want to be mahmir, like the Ben Ish Chai. If there's enough time in the month and you're not worried that you're going to miss it, then fine. In Chutz La'aretz, we're very careful to try to say it even. There are many opinions that say even after 3 days into the lunar cycle, you can begin to say Birkat HaLevana, especially if you're in a very moist climate where there are a lot of clouds. If a person sees clouds approaching, and when they start the beracha, the moon will be uncovered, and in the middle of the beracha, the cloud is going to cover the moon, do not start saying the beracha. Don't say the beracha in that case. It has to be good for the entire beracha. We say a lot of prose, a lot of pesukim leading up to that beracha, Birkat HaLevana. So if a person says, well, I'll have enough time to say just the beracha, but if I say the prose, if I say Lam Natseach, if I say the Hallelujah, if I say all of those nice things which we should say, I'm going to miss it. Then skip that, say the beracha, and then come back to the prose. A person should not gaze at the moon while they're saying the beracha. First, we look at the moon, we identify, make sure it's a kosher moon. Then we either look down or turn our back to the moon and say the beracha. We don't want anybody to think that we are worshiping idols. And according to the Kabbalah, it's a problem of gazing at the moon while reciting the beracha, just like it would be as a rainbow as well. Again, that's from the Kabbalah. I don't have a deeper explanation than that, as I'm not a Kabbalist. It's also a mitzvah to recite the Birkat HaLevana while you're standing, because you're accepting the presence of the Shekhinah. But if a person is sick or can't stand, they can do it while sitting. It's no problem. Lechatechila, in the first place, we do not say Birkat HaLevana on Shabbat, meaning Friday night, or Yom Tov, or a holiday. There are many different reasons to do so. The Maharil brought down the reason that there's something of Tehom Shabbat. Just like I can't travel 2,000 feet out, 2,000 amot outside of the city on Shabbat or Yom Tov, So the distance from the ground to the moon is much more like that. Is much more than that. So since the moon is in its place in the sky, and we're greeting that Shekhinah as if we were greeting the moon at its place in the sky, it's like we're traveling outside of the Tehom. A lot of people don't like that answer, but again, Maharil nonetheless, we can't scoff at it. We have to understand it and internalize it for what it's worth. That's one, is because of violating Tehom Shabbat. The Ben Ish Chai says, no, we're obligated to awaken the happiness anew when we say Birkat HaLevana, and if we were to say it on Shabbat and Yom Tov, which are days that are already happy, so then our additional happiness of blessing the moon is not going to be as recognizable, so we don't want to do it on that. The Ben Ish Chai brings a second reason that says, during Birkat HaLevana, we curse the nations of the world by saying, Tipol alehem emata v'pachad, meaning our enemies. And we're not supposed to do that on Shabbat in any way, shape, or form. However, if a person missed the Birkat HaLevana because of weather or not because they were just forgetful and they left it for Shabbat because it's more convenient, but if they was stuck all week and Shabbat is the only time, then they are permitted to do so. Last slide, we said the Shabbat. The Birkat HaLevana should be said while standing under a clear sky and not under an awning or a building, so everybody moves out from underneath the awning. Because why? Because Birkat HaLevana is like greeting the procession of the king, and it's not kavod for you to be indoors while the king is outdoors. You have to show that you're together and you're with him. But if for some reason a person can't go outside, you're allowed to say Birkat HaLevana from an open window indoors, but again, it has to be that the person is anus. And finally, it's preferable to recite Birkat HaLevana with a minyan with 10 people, because we have a klal, berov am hadrat melech, which they're better to praise the king. Again, we're accepting the Shekhinah, praising the king. It's better to do so with a lot of people than with fewer people. But again, if the person has the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah alone, you should do that and not wait for a minyan, because there is a chance that you might not be able to fulfill the mitzvah altogether. That's it for us. Hope you enjoyed the mitzvah of Kiddush HaHodesh. So remember, that's a mitzvah, HaHodesh Hazeh Lachem, to set the calendar and to help us with our holidays. And of course, we commemorate that cycle with Birkat HaLevana nowadays. Shabbat Shalom, and see you next week.